He was ignored throughout the entire auction. People laughed when the man paid the lowest price for that weak and forgotten horse. But when the veterinarian approached, he turned pale and covered his mouth within seconds. Everyone around fell into absolute silence, unaware of what was about to be revealed. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment where in the world you're watching from, because now I'm going to tell you everything. Dad, what was Mom's favorite color? The question hung in the quiet kitchen. Jackson Miller stopped washing the breakfast plate in his hands. The water from the faucet ran over his fingers. He looked at his son, Elijah, who was sitting at the table with a half-eaten bowl of cereal. "That's a big question for 7 in the morning," Jackson said, his voice a low rumble. He turned off the water. "I just wondered," Elijah said softly. He stared into his bowl. "I don't want to forget." Jackson dried his hands on a towel. He walked over and sat down in the chair next to Elijah. The house was very quiet. It was always quiet now. "It was green," Jackson said, "but not just any green. She called it spring grass after the rain green. She had a shirt that color. She said it made her feel happy." Elijah nodded, a small smile touching his lips. "I remember the shirt." "Me too," Jackson said. He put his hand on Elijah's shoulder for a moment. Then he stood up. The moment was over. "Finish up, buddy. The bus comes in 20 minutes. 2 years had passed since Clara died. 2 years of quiet mornings in their small ranch house outside Billings, Montana. Jackson moved through each day with slow, careful steps. He fixed farm equipment for a living. Tractors, balers, mowers, things that broke down and could be put back together with the right parts and patience. He wished his life was as easy to fix. After the school bus pulled away, Jackson went to his workshop. It was a large shed next to the old barn. He lined up his wrenches on the workbench, each one exactly a finger's width apart. A man named Carl was bringing his broken-down tractor by later. Jackson needed to keep busy. His mind drifted as he waited. He thought of Clara's laugh. He thought of the empty side of the bed. The silence in the house was a heavy thing. It pressed on his chest. Elijah felt it too. Jackson could see it in the way his son sometimes just stared out a window, or in the way he collected his special rocks, naming them like they were friends. The old barn held hay from 2 summers ago. They had no animals. Clara's horse had been sold after she passed. It was too much to see it every day. She would always say that stall looked too empty now. At 3 o'clock, Jackson was under the tractor, his hands black with grease. He heard the school bus rumble to a stop out on the main road. A few minutes later, the workshop door creaked open. "Hey, Dad." "Hey, son." Jackson slid out from under the machine. "How was school?" "It was okay. We learned about planets." Elijah put his backpack on a clean spot on the floor. He held out his hand. In his palm was a gray rock with a white stripe through it. "I found this at recess. I'm going to call it Milky Way granite." Jackson took the rock and turned it over in his dirty hand. He tried to show the right kind of interest. "That's a good one. Real good." He handed it back. Elijah's smile faded a little. He put the rock in his pocket. "Are you almost done?" "Just about. Carl needs this back tomorrow." Jackson stood up, his knees cracking. He wiped his hands on a rag. "You got any homework?" "A little math." "Okay, go on in and start it. I'll be there soon to make dinner." Elijah nodded but didn't move. He scuffed his shoe on the concrete floor. "Dad, do you think maybe this weekend we could do something? Something fun?" Jackson felt an ache in his heart. He was so tired. All he wanted to do on Saturday was sleep in, then maybe fix the loose step on the porch. But Elijah's green eyes were so hopeful, so much like his mother's. "What did you have in mind?" Jackson asked. "I don't know. Something different." Jackson looked out the workshop door at the empty field, the quiet barn. He thought about the flyer he'd seen in town. "There's that animal auction over in Laurel on Saturday, the big one they have every year. We could go look. We don't have to buy anything, just go see." Elijah's whole face lit up. "Really? With all the horses and cows?" "That's the one." "Yes, let's do that." The excitement in Elijah's voice was a sound Jackson hadn't heard in a long time. It was a good sound. Later that night, after a dinner of spaghetti where they didn't talk much, Jackson tucked Elijah into bed. "Saturday will be fun," Elijah said, hugging his pillow. "I hope so, buddy." Jackson smoothed his son's hair. "Get some sleep." He turned off the light and walked down the hall to his own room. The silence wrapped around him again. He took his old phone from the nightstand. He scrolled through until he found what he was looking for. A saved voicemail from Clara. He put the phone to his ear and pressed play. Her voice filled the dark room. "Hey, honey. Just reminding you to pick up more milk on your way home. Oh, and Elijah needs 3 dozen cookies for school tomorrow. I know. I forgot too. Love you." Her laugh at the end was the best part. Jackson listened to the message 2 times. He saved it again. He looked out the window at the dark shape of the empty barn. He and Elijah were alone out here. They had each other, but a big part of their family was missing. They were going through the motions, waiting for something, anything to change. Saturday could not come soon enough. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the kitchen on Saturday morning. Elijah was already dressed, bouncing on his toes by the door. "You eat all that?" Jackson asked, nodding at the empty plate on the table. "Yes, sir, I'm ready." Jackson smiled a little. "All right then, let's hit the road." The drive to Laurel took about an hour. Elijah stared out the truck window at the big Montana sky. "Do you think they'll have baby cows?" "Probably," Jackson said. "It's a big auction. They'll have a little bit of everything." When they pulled into the fairgrounds, the noise hit them first. It was a loud rumble of truck engines, animal sounds, and people shouting. The big main barn was huge and dusty. Men and women in cowboy hats moved everywhere. They led horses and calves on ropes. The air smelled like hay, dirt, and animals. Elijah's eyes were wide. "It's so loud." "Stay close," Jackson said, putting a hand on his son's shoulder. They walked into the barn. Wooden bleachers were full of people. In the middle was a dirt ring. A man with a fast, loud voice was standing on a high platform. He was the auctioneer. "What's he saying?" Elijah whispered. "He's saying numbers real fast. People are bidding. They say how much money they will pay for an animal." They found 2 spots on a bench near the back. For a while, they just watched. Strong, beautiful horses were led into the ring. Their coats shone under the lights. Men raised their hands. The auctioneer's voice was a chant. "I have $200. Will you give 3? Jackson pointed things out quietly. "See that man in the green hat? He just bought that brown horse." Elijah nodded, taking it all in. Then the mood changed. A horse was led into the ring, but it didn't look like the others. Its coat was a dull, matted brown. Its ribs showed under its skin. Its head hung low, and it walked slowly, without any spirit. The auctioneer's voice lost some of its energy. "Now, folks, we have a gelding named Rusty. Nice quiet horse." People in the crowd shifted in their seats. Someone let out a short laugh. "What's wrong with him, Dad?" Elijah asked. "He's just having a hard time," Jackson said. He looked at the horse. He saw how the animal's eyes were half closed. He saw a deep tiredness. The auctioneer tried. "We'll give him a $25 for a sound horse?" No one raised a hand. A few people shook their heads and smiled. It was an ugly smile. 15? Anyone at 15? Silence. Elijah leaned close to his father. He looked sad. Jackson didn't answer. He was staring at the horse. He saw more than a skinny animal. He saw a creature that had given up. He knew that feeling. He felt it every morning when he woke up in a too-quiet house. He felt it in the heavy silence between him and his son. It was loneliness. The auctioneer sighed. "Folks, come on. $10? This is a horse, not a bag of feed." More laughter rippled through the barn. A voice in Jackson's head that sounded like Clara spoke clearly. Asterisk. Do something. Without thinking, without planning, Jackson's hand went up in the air. The auctioneer saw it. "I have $10. Thank you, sir." But Jackson spoke. His voice was quiet but clear in the sudden quiet of the barn. $1. For a second, there was no sound. Then the whole barn erupted in louder laughter. People turned to look at the man in the feed store cap. The auctioneer stared. "Mister, did you say $1? "Yes," Jackson said. His face felt warm, but he didn't put his hand down. "Sold. For $1 to the gentleman in the back." The auctioneer slammed his gavel down, shaking his head with a chuckle. Elijah tugged Jackson's sleeve, his face confused and embarrassed. "Dad?" "It's okay," Jackson said. He stood up. He ignored the people still laughing and pointing. He walked down to the pen where they were leading the skinny horse. A man working there handed him a rope. He's all yours. Good luck." Jackson took the rope. He looked into the horse's face. Up close, it was worse. The horse didn't even look at him. "Hey there, Rusty," Jackson whispered. He led the horse out of the barn with Elijah following close behind. The bright sunlight made the animal look even thinner. Jackson paid a man at the office one single dollar bill. He got a paper that said the horse was his. "What do we do with him?" Elijah asked, touching the horse's neck gently. "We take him home," Jackson said. He opened the back of his old stock trailer, which was hitched to the truck. It was empty and clean. "Come on, boy, let's go." The horse walked slowly up the ramp. Jackson closed the gate. The drive home was quieter than the drive there. Elijah kept looking back through the truck window at the trailer. "He's really ours?" Elijah asked. "He is." "Why did you buy him, Dad?" Everyone was laughing. Jackson was quiet for a long minute. He watched the road. "Because no one else wanted him," he finally said. "Sometimes when nobody wants you, you just need one person to say yes." Elijah thought about that. "I'm glad you said yes." When they got home, Jackson led Rusty into the old empty barn. He put him in a stall with fresh hay and water. The horse stood still, not eating. Jackson and Elijah leaned on the stall door, watching him. "We need to call Dr. Vance," Jackson said. "Make sure he's okay." "He will be," Elijah said with a child's certainty. He looked at his father. This was a good day. Jackson put his arm around his son. For the first time in a long time, looking at the sad $1 horse in his barn, he felt like maybe it was. The next morning, Jackson made the call. Dr. Arlo Vance's truck came up the driveway just after 10 o'clock. Elijah ran out to meet him. "Dr. Vance, we got a horse." The vet smiled, a kind, tired smile. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a butterscotch candy, handing it to Elijah. "So I heard, a $1 special. Let's have a look." Jackson stood by the barn door. "Thanks for coming, Arlo. I know it's a Saturday." "No trouble," Dr. Vance said, pulling his bag from the truck. "Always liked a mystery." They walked into the barn. Rusty stood in the same spot, head low. She hadn't touched the water or the hay. Dr. Vance's easy manner changed as he got closer. His eyes, sharp behind his glasses, moved over the horse. He didn't say hello to her. He just started to work. He looked at her teeth. He ran his hands along her neck, her back, her ribs. He listened to her belly with a stethoscope. Jackson and Elijah watched in silence. The only sounds were the horse's breathing and the soft rustle of the vet's movements. Dr. Vance's hands were moving over the horse's round, hard belly when they suddenly stopped. He pressed in one spot, then another. He listened again with the stethoscope, his head tilted. He stayed very still for a long time. When he stood up, his face was pale. He looked from the horse to Jackson, then back to the horse. "Jackson," he said. His voice was a whisper. "What's wrong? Is it bad?" Jackson asked, his heart sinking. Dr. Vance took off his hat and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "Nothing's wrong, but nothing is what it seems." He spoke slowly, choosing each word. "This horse isn't sick. She's not a he at all. She's a mare, and she's not skinny because she's starving." He paused, letting his eyes lock onto Jackson's. "She's skinny because all her energy is going to the baby. She's pregnant, Jackson. Very pregnant. I'd say she could foal any day now." The barn seemed to tilt. Jackson grabbed the stall door to steady himself. "Pregnant? A baby horse?" Elijah's voice was full of wonder. "A baby horse," Dr. Vance confirmed. He wasn't smiling. He looked serious, almost worried. "But that's not all. Look at her." He pointed, not touching the horse. "See the shape of her head, the way her neck is set, the feathering on her fetlocks?" Jackson shook his head. "I don't know horse breeds, Arlo. I fix tractors. This isn't a common ranch horse. Under all this neglect, the poor coat, the lack of muscle, I believe this is a Frisian mare, a purebred one, or very close to it." The word meant nothing to Jackson. "A what?" "A Frisian. They're from Europe. Black, elegant, used for dressage and driving. Very rare here. Very valuable." Dr. Vance let out a long breath. "If she is, and she has a purebred foal, that baby could be worth more money than I make in a year, maybe two." The word valuable hung in the dusty air. It felt like a physical thing, heavy and foreign. Jackson had only wanted to help a sad creature. He had thought of feed bills and shelter, not of fortunes. A fortune? Jackson repeated, dumbfounded. For a horse, yes, for the right buyer. Dr. Vance put his stethoscope back in his bag. His movements were slow, thoughtful. You bought a $1 mare who's about to give you a foal that could sell for $50,000, maybe more. Elijah's eyes were like saucers. $50,000? It's possible. Dr. Vance looked at Jackson, not at the boy. This changes things, Jackson. You understand that? Not everyone will be happy for you. Some people will see a dollar sign, not a horse. Jackson stared at Rusty. The horse finally lifted her head and looked back at him. In her deep brown eyes, he didn't see value. He still saw the same tired loneliness from the auction. Now, he also saw the heavy burden she was carrying. Doesn't matter, Jackson said, more to himself than to the vet. She's here now. She's ours. We have to take care of her. Dr. Vance nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. All right then. You'll need to watch her closely. Very closely. The foaling could be hard on her given her condition. You have my number. Call me day or night when she starts. Don't wait. After Dr. Vance left, Jackson and Elijah stayed in the barn. They didn't speak for a long time. The quiet was different now. It was filled with the soft sound of Rusty breathing, with the incredible truth of what was happening inside her. Elijah reached through the stall bars and carefully touched the mare's swollen side. A baby's in there. Yeah, Jackson said. He felt a stirring of something he hadn't felt in 2 years. It wasn't joy, not yet. It was the nervous, electric feeling of a new beginning, a frightening, hopeful new beginning. We'll need to get ready, he said, his mind starting to turn with practical things. We need different feed for her, and a safe, clean place for the birth. He looked at his son, who was smiling a real full smile. For a moment, the heavy quiet of their house was forgotten, replaced by the gentle rustle of hay and the promise of a new life in their old barn. News in a small county moves like water. It finds every crack. Jackson went to the feed store in Billings on Monday morning. He needed the special grain mix Dr. Vance had recommended. As he walked down the aisle, a man he knew vaguely, another rancher named Tim, stopped him. Jackson Miller, Tim said, a wide grin on his face. Heard you pulled a fast one over in Laurel. Jackson gripped a bag of grain. I didn't pull anything, Tim. Oh, come on now. A purebred Frisian for $1? That's the kind of luck a man dreams of. You playing the lottery next? Tim clapped him on the shoulder, but the touch felt heavy. That foal's gonna be worth a king's ransom. We're just taking care of the horse, Jackson said, his voice flat. He moved past Tim to the checkout. The young woman at the register, Becky, smiled at him. That'll be $24.50. As Jackson handed her the money, she leaned in. My mom said your boy is telling everyone at school about the baby horse. He's so excited. Jackson forced a smile. He is. Thanks, Becky. Everywhere, it was the same. At the gas station, Old Man Peters called out from his truck. Hey, Jackson, you need a bodyguard for that gold mine of yours yet? He laughed a wheezing laugh. At the hardware store buying a new latch for the barn door, the clerk said, Heard you got a real looker coming. Gonna sell it and buy a new place? Just fixing a door, Jackson mumbled, taking his change. By Wednesday, the feeling had changed. The smiles were still there, but some of them didn't reach the eyes. The questions became sharper. He was under a combine at a farm 10 miles out when the owner, Carl, brought him a glass of iced tea. Appreciate the work, Jackson. Carl sat on an upturned bucket. He was quiet for a minute. Heard some talk in town about your horse. What kind of talk? Jackson asked, sliding out from under the machine. Oh, you know. That maybe you knew what you were buying. That a man like Marvin Briggs, the big breeder who was at that auction, is mighty upset. Says he was cheated. Jackson felt a cold knot form in his stomach. I didn't cheat anyone. I bought a sick horse nobody wanted. I believe you, Carl said, holding up a hand. But Marvin's got a loud voice and a lot of money. Money makes people listen. You might want to watch your back. When Jackson got home, Elijah ran out to meet the truck. His face was not the happy one from the weekend. What's wrong, son? Elijah scuffed his shoe in the dirt. Some kids at school said stuff. They said you're a liar. They said their dad said you're gonna get rich off a trick. Jackson knelt down. He put his hands on Elijah's shoulders. Look at me. I did not trick anyone. We gave a sad horse a home. The baby is a surprise, a good surprise, that's all. But why are people saying mean things? Elijah's eyes were wet. Because, Jackson sighed. Sometimes when good things happen to someone, other people get jealous. They don't understand, so they make up stories. That evening, Jackson stood at the kitchen window, staring out at the barn. The late sun made the wood glow. Inside was an animal that had, in just a few days, turned his quiet life upside down. He didn't feel lucky. He felt watched. He felt a target on his back. The phone rang. It was Dr. Vance. Jackson, heard you've been the talk of the county. You heard right, Jackson said, rubbing his forehead. I also heard Marvin Briggs has been asking around, asking about auction rules, about vet records. He's digging. What do I do, Arlo? There was a long pause on the line. You do what you're doing. You take care of that mare, you keep your head down, and you lock your gates at night. After he hung up, Jackson walked out to the barn. Rusty was lying down in the deep straw, sleeping. Her big belly rose and fell with her breath. Elijah was sitting in the corner of the stall, reading a book about horses. She's okay, Dad, Elijah whispered. Jackson nodded. He looked at his son, then at the horse. He thought about the laughter at the auction, which had now turned into whispers and pointed fingers. He had wanted to do a simple, kind thing. Now, his simple life felt fragile, like glass in his hands. He checked the latch on the stall door. Then he went and checked the lock on the main barn door. Finally, he walked the fence line of the small pasture, his eyes searching for any break in the wire. Everything looked solid. Everything looked fine. But the feeling wouldn't leave him. The feeling that someone, somewhere, was looking at his little ranch and seeing something they wanted to take. The shiny black truck with Wyoming plates came up the driveway on Thursday afternoon. It moved slowly, like it was judging everything it saw. Jackson was in the workshop, but he heard the engine. He looked out and felt his stomach tighten. He walked out, wiping his hands on a rag. A man got out of the truck. He was big, with a red face and a new-looking cowboy hat. His smile was wide and full of teeth. "Afternoon," the man said, his voice loud in the quiet yard. "You Jackson Miller?" "I am." The man walked over, his hand outstretched. Jackson shook it. The grip was too firm. "Marvin Briggs, from over in Cheyenne. Breed horses. I was at the Laurel auction last Saturday." "I see," Jackson said, his voice quiet. "Saw your little purchase." Marvin laughed, but it was a short, hard sound. "Quite the scene. But then, we hear all sorts of interesting news out here, don't we?" Elijah came out of the house and stood on the porch watching. "What can I do for you, Mr. Briggs?" Jackson asked. Marvin's smile stayed fixed. He reached into the inside pocket of his expensive jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Well, it's about that mare you let out of there. There's been a bit of a mix-up, a paperwork error." He handed the paper to Jackson. It looked official, with typed words and a stamp. Jackson's eyes scanned it, but the legal words swam together. "What error?" "The lot number," Marvin said, pointing a thick finger at the page. "See here? This says the horse you paid for was lot number 114, a gelding named Rusty. But the animal you took was lot number 100 and *7*, a pregnant mare, unbeknownst to the auction house, different horse entirely." Jackson stared at him. "The man handed me the horse. I paid for the horse they led out. It was the only $1 horse there." "I'm sure it seemed that way," Marvin said, his tone smooth. "But the paperwork is the law, son. The sale isn't legal. That mare, by all rights, belongs to the auction house. And as the only serious bidder who was interested in that lot before the confusion, I've reached an agreement with them to purchase her, fair and square, for a proper price." He took the paper back gently. "So, you see, it's all a big misunderstanding. You get your dollar back. I get the horse I was meant to buy. Simple." Jackson felt the world tilting again. He looked at the man's confident face, then at the fancy truck. He thought of all the whispers in town. This was where they led. "No," Jackson said. The word came out soft but clear. Marvin's smile flickered. "Excuse me?" "I said no. The horse is here. She's in my barn. I bought her. She's mine." Jackson's heart was pounding in his ears. Marvin sighed as if dealing with a stubborn child. He leaned closer. "Jackson, can I call you Jackson?" Let's be reasonable businessmen. You have something that, in your hands, is a pleasant surprise. In my hands, it's a legacy. I have the facilities, the knowledge, the market. I can give that foal the life it deserves. You're a mechanic. What are you going to do with a fancy show horse? Love it. Elijah's small voice came from the porch. He was standing straight, his fists clenched at his sides. Marvin glanced at him, then back at Jackson, dismissing the boy entirely. I'm trying to do this the easy way. I can offer you $5,000 right now for your trouble. That's a lot more than $1. You walk away a very lucky man. $5,000. It was more money than Jackson had seen at once in years. It could fix the roof. It could buy Elijah new clothes. The offer sat between them, heavy and tempting. Jackson looked past Marvin at the barn where the tired mare was resting. He thought of the sadness in her eyes at the auction. He thought of the promise he'd made just to give her a home. She's not for sale, Jackson said. Not for $5,000, not for $50,000. You need to leave now. For the first time, the polite mask slipped from Marvin's face. His eyes turned cold. He slowly put the paper back in his pocket. That's a real shame, he said, his voice low and flat. A real shame, because the next conversation won't be so friendly. It'll be with a sheriff holding a court order. He turned and walked back to his truck. He opened the door, then paused, looking back at Jackson. You're out of your depth, Miller. This isn't a game for kind hearts. It's a business. And in business, you either swim with the big fish or you get eaten. The truck door slammed. The engine roared to life. Marvin turned the vehicle around in a wide arc, kicking up dust, and drove back down the driveway. Jackson didn't move until the dust settled. He felt Elijah come to stand beside him, slipping a small hand into his. He's a liar, Dad, Elijah said. I know, Jackson whispered. But the fear was there, cold and solid. He was a simple man with a simple life. He didn't know how to fight a man with papers and money and a mean smile. He just knew he had to. The next day, Jackson checked the fence line 3 times. Each wire was tight. Every post was solid. He locked the main gate with a heavy padlock. He felt foolish, but the cold look in Marvin Briggs's eyes wouldn't leave him. On Saturday, Jackson had to drive into town for a tractor part. He didn't want to leave Elijah alone, but the part was for a job on Monday. He pulled his son aside before he left. You stay in the house. Don't go near the road. If anyone comes, you don't answer the door. You call me right away. I will, Dad, Elijah said, his face serious. The trip felt longer than ever. Every minute he was away, Jackson's nerves tightened. When he got back, Elijah was on the porch, just as he'd left him. Nothing was out of place. Sunday was quiet, too quiet. The air felt heavy. Jackson worked in his shop, but he kept looking out the window toward the pasture. Rusty was outside, grazing slowly. She looked bigger every day. That night, after Elijah was in bed, Jackson made one last walk around the property with a flashlight. The beam of light swept over the fence posts. Everything was normal. The lock on the gate was secure. He was woken by the sound of a truck engine, loud and fast, and a sharp blare of a horn. It was followed by the screech of brakes. Jackson was out of bed in a second, his heart in his throat. He looked out the bedroom window. His blood ran cold. Down on the main road, a semi-truck was stopped, its hazard lights blinking. And in the beam of its headlights, standing frozen in the middle of the asphalt, was Rusty. Elijah, Jackson shouted, pulling on his boots. Stay here! He ran out of the house, bare feet shoved into boots, his pajama shirt flapping. He didn't take the driveway. He crashed through the small ditch and scrambled up onto the road. The truck driver, a man with a scared face, was leaning out his window. She just walked right out. I didn't see her until the last second. I know. I'm sorry, Jackson gasped, his breath ragged. He approached Rusty slowly, his hands out. She was shaking, her sides heaving. Easy, girl. Easy. He grabbed her halter and led her off the road back toward the property. That's when he saw it. In the glow from the truck's lights, he could see a section of his fence, about 20 feet long, where the wires were hanging loose. They weren't broken from an animal or weather. They were cleanly cut, each wire snipped with bolt cutters. The truck driver saw it too. He let out a low whistle. That ain't no accident, friend. No, Jackson whispered, a hot anger rising in his chest for the first time. It's not. He got Rusty back into the pasture through the open gap and tied her to a strong post near the barn. He found his tools, and with hands that shook with rage and fear, he spliced the wires back together enough to hold for the night. The truck driver waited until he was done, gave a solemn wave, and drove off. Jackson went back inside. Elijah was standing in the dark living room crying silently. Is she okay? She's okay. She's safe now. Who did it, Dad? Jackson knelt and pulled his son into a tight hug. A bad man, Elijah. A bad man did it. The next morning, Dr. Vance's truck came speeding up the driveway. News traveled fast. He examined Rusty thoroughly in the stall. She's fine, shaken up but fine. No injuries, he said, closing his medical bag. His face was grim. You know who did this. I know, Jackson said. You have to report it to the sheriff, Jackson. Cut fences are a serious crime out here. And say what? Jackson's voice was tired. I think Marvin Briggs did it because he wants my horse. I have no proof. It's my word against a rich man's. Doctor. Vance didn't argue. He looked at Rusty, who was lying down, breathing heavily. He knelt and felt her belly, checked her gums. When he stood, his expression had changed. Forget the sheriff for a minute. You have a bigger problem. She's close, Jackson. Very close. The stress of last night might have moved things along. You need to be ready. Tonight, tomorrow, it's time. After Dr. Vance left, Jackson and Elijah prepared the stall with fresh, clean straw. They filled buckets with warm water and set out clean towels. They did the work in silence. Jackson's anger had settled into a hard, cold dread. Marvin Briggs had tried to scare him. He had tried to take Rusty by trickery, then by threat. Now, he had tried to get her killed. He wouldn't stop. And now, the very thing he wanted, the valuable foal, was about to arrive in the middle of it all. As the sun began to set, the wind picked up, moaning through the cracks in the old barn. The sky to the west was dark purple. A storm was coming. Rusty paced in her stall, restless, looking at her sides. Jackson put a hand on Elijah's shoulder. Go pack a bag with some clothes and your toothbrush. We're sleeping in the barn tonight. The wind shook the old barn. Rain hammered on the roof like 1,000 tiny drums. Jackson and Elijah sat on a blanket in the corner of the stall, a lantern between them. Rusty was lying on her side in the deep straw, breathing in short, loud pants. Is she okay, Dad? Elijah asked, his voice trembling. She's just working hard, Jackson said, but his own hands were unsteady. He held the horse care book open on his lap, but the words blurred in the dim light. Rusty let out a low groan and pushed. Nothing happened. She rested, then pushed again. Her struggles filled the small space. Jackson's phone rang, sharp and sudden. He fumbled to answer it. It was Dr. Vance. Jackson, I'm stuck. A trailer accident on the highway. 3 cows hurt. I can't get away. Is she pushing? Yes. For about an hour now. Dr. Vance's voice was tense. Listen to me. Sometimes with a first foal it's hard. You might need to help. Do you see 2 front feet and a nose? Jackson moved closer, his heart pounding. He looked. He saw 1 tiny hoof in the straw, but nothing else. I see 1 foot, only 1. A long silence filled the phone, broken only by the storm and Rusty's heavy breathing. That's not good, Jackson. The foal might be stuck. It needs to come front feet first, nose between them. If it's turned wrong. What do I do? Jackson's voice broke. You have to reach in, gently. You have to feel for the other leg and try to bring it forward. Do you understand? Jackson looked at his hands. They were mechanic's hands, good with tools and metal. This was different. This was life. I understand. Be clean, be gentle, and be brave. Call me when it's over. The line went dead. Jackson put the phone down. He looked at Elijah's terrified face. He took a deep breath. I have to help her. I need you to hold the lantern for me. Can you do that? Elijah nodded, wiping his eyes with his sleeve. He picked up the lantern. Jackson washed his hands and arms in the bucket of warm water. He knelt behind Rusty in the straw. He spoke softly to the mare. Easy, girl. I'm here to help. He reached in. The warmth and pressure inside was overwhelming. He felt the slick body of the foal. He found 1 bent leg. He followed it up to the knee. He cupped his hand around the tiny hoof and began to pull, guiding it slowly, carefully downward. Rusty groaned and pushed again. Jackson pulled steadily. Suddenly, a second tiny hoof slipped into place beside the first one. 2 feet, Dad. I see 2 feet, Elijah cried. Good. That's good, Jackson breathed, his arm aching. But the nose wasn't there. The head was still back. He had to find it. He reached in again, his fingers searching the wet, warm darkness. He found the foal's head, turned to the side. He slid his fingers under the little jaw and gently, so gently, brought the head forward until the nose rested between the 2 front feet. Now, he said, pulling his arm free. Now we wait for her to push. They didn't have to wait long. With the next big contraction, Rusty gave a mighty heave. 2 front feet emerged, then a nose, then a head. Jackson held the foal's head, supporting it. Come on, Rusty, Elijah whispered, leaning close. You can do it. With one last effort, the wet black body of the foal slid out into the straw. It didn't move. Jackson quickly cleared the birth sac from its nose and mouth. He rubbed its side with a rough towel. Breathe, he begged. Come on, little one, breathe. For a terrible second, nothing happened. Then, the foal gave a small shudder. It snorted, a wet, gasping sound. Its chest rose and fell. It was breathing. Rusty turned her head, straining to see her baby. She made a soft nickering sound. The foal, a little filly, lifted her head for the first time. Her coat was jet black and wet, her legs long and awkward. She blinked her dark eyes. Elijah started to cry, but they were happy tears. She's so pretty. Jackson sat back in the straw, exhausted. His arms were trembling. He watched as the mare began to lick her foal clean. The storm was still raging outside, but inside the barn, there was a new, quiet peace. What do we call her? Elijah asked, reaching out to touch the foal's damp neck. Jackson looked at the little black horse, born in the darkest part of a stormy night. Midnight, he said. We'll call her Midnight. As the first gray light of dawn began to seep through to the barn boards, Midnight tried to stand. Her legs wobbled and splayed. She fell. She tried again. Jackson and Elijah watched, not helping, letting her find her strength. On her third try, she pushed herself up and stayed standing, leaning against her mother's side. They had done it. Together, they had brought new life into the world. Jackson put his arm around his son, pulling him close. For a moment, looking at the 2 horses, he felt only joy. Then, the sound of a truck engine cut through the morning quiet. Not 1, but 2 vehicles were coming fast up their driveway. The 2 trucks pulled to a stop in front of the barn. The first was Marvin Briggs's shiny black one. The second was a brown pickup with the words County Sheriff on the door. Jackson stood up, his body stiff and tired from the long night. He stepped out of the barn, putting himself between the door and the men. Elijah stayed inside, peering out. Marvin got out, his face fresh and clean-shaven. He looked at the muddy yard and the old barn with clear disgust. A tall man in a sheriff's uniform got out of the other truck. He had a kind, tired face. "Morning, Jackson," the sheriff said, his voice calm. "This is Marvin Briggs. He says there's a dispute about a horse." "There's no dispute, Sheriff," Marvin said, walking forward. He held up that same piece of paper. "There's a clear legal error. The horse in that barn belongs to the auction house, and I have a valid purchase agreement. This man is in possession of stolen property." Jackson's mouth was dry. "That's not true. I bought the mare at the auction for $1. Everyone saw it." "You bought a different horse," Marvin said smoothly, handing the paper to the sheriff. "Lot numbers, Sheriff. It's all right here. The animal he has matches the description of a pregnant Frisian mare that was in the wrong pen, a mare I had bid on earlier. My bid was recorded. The auction house has admitted the mistake." The sheriff looked at the paper, then at Jackson. "You have a bill of sale, Jackson?" "Yes. Inside." Jackson went into the barn and came back with a simple receipt from the auction office. It said, "1 horse, Rusty, $1. The sheriff compared the 2 papers. He sighed. "Jackson, your receipt doesn't have a lot number. His paperwork from the auction house does. Their letter says the mare you have is lot 107. The gelding you paid for was lot 114. "But they gave me the horse," Jackson said, his voice weak. "The man let her out and I paid." "Honest mistake in the chaos of the sale, I'm sure," Marvin said, not sounding sure at all. "But the law is the law. I've come to collect my property, and I understand there's a new foal, which of course belongs to the mother's owner." At that moment, Elijah ran out of the barn. "No, you can't take them," My dad helped her be born. We saved her." Marvin looked down at Elijah, his expression cold. "This is a business matter, son, not a petting zoo." The sheriff knelt down to Elijah's level. "I'm sorry, son. I have to go by the papers." He stood up, his face grim. "Jackson, I'm going to have to ask you to turn over the horses to Mr. Briggs. You can fight it in court, but for now, the paperwork supports his claim." Jackson felt the ground falls away beneath him. The exhaustion, the fear, the triumph of the night, all of it crashed down into a hollow, empty pit. He had nothing, no money for a lawyer, no fancy papers, just the truth, which didn't seem to matter. "Please," Jackson whispered, the word barely audible. "I don't have a choice, Jackson," the sheriff said softly. "It's the law." Marvin walked past them toward the barn door. "I've got a trailer coming. Should be here in 20 minutes. They're gentle, right? I don't want the foals stressed." Jackson watched him go inside, into the barn where Rusty and Midnight stood. He couldn't move. He had failed. He had lost Clara. Now he was losing this too, the one good, hopeful thing. Elijah grabbed his father's hand, holding it tightly. He was crying quietly. "Dad, don't let him." Jackson looked at his son's heartbroken face. He wanted to be strong. He wanted to fight, but he was so tired, and the law was a wall he didn't know how to climb. He saw Marvin inside, looking at Midnight with a calculating smile, already seeing dollar signs. He had never felt so helpless. The sunrise, which had felt so beautiful an hour ago, now felt like the end of everything. The sound of more engines cut through the morning air. Not just one, several. They came from down the main road, a slow rumble of trucks and cars turning into Jackson's driveway. Marvin stepped out of the barn, frowning. "What's all this?" Jackson and the sheriff turned. A line of vehicles was coming up the drive, kicking up dust in the morning light. First was Carl's old green pickup, then Tim's flatbed. Becky from the feed store was in her sedan. More trucks followed, some Jackson recognized, some he didn't. They parked all around Marvin's shiny truck, blocking it in. People got out, ranchers in work clothes, neighbors, the man who ran the hardware store. They walked over, a quiet group, forming a half circle around Jackson, Elijah, and the sheriff. Carl stepped forward first. He looked at the sheriff, then at Marvin. "We heard there was some trouble out here, Sheriff." Marvin's smile was tight. "No trouble, just the law being followed. This is a private matter." "Ain't so private when you're cutting fence lines on a man's property," said a voice from the back. It was Old Man Peters. He leaned on his cane. "Saw the tire tracks by the road last night. Big, wide tires, like the ones on that fancy truck of yours." The sheriff's eyes sharpened. "You saw this, Dale?" "I did. Drove past after the near miss with the semi. Saw the cut wires, saw the tracks leading out. Didn't put it together till I heard Marvin here was making threats." Another man stepped forward. It was the auctioneer from Laurel. He pointed a finger at Marvin. "And that paperwork is hogwash. I ran that ring. The only horse that went unsold that day was the skinny brown one. The one this man," he pointed to Jackson, "bought for $1. I remember his boy's face. There was no other mare, no lot 107. "You're lying." Marvin's face turned a deep red. "You have no proof of any of this. I have a signed document." Then another truck pulled in fast. Dr. Vance's truck. He got out carrying a large file. He walked straight to the sheriff. "Sheriff, I have proof," Dr. Vance said, his voice calm and clear. He opened the file. "These are my medical records for the mare. Detailed exams, photographs of her condition when Jackson brought her home. She was severely neglected, underweight, and worm-infested. She had not received proper care for months, if not years. This is not a horse that was part of a lot at a reputable auction. This is a rescue case." He handed a photograph to the sheriff. It showed Rusty that first day, her ribs stark against her skin. If Mr. Briggs had a valid claim, where are his medical records? Where was his care for this valuable animal? Why was she in such a state? The sheriff looked at the photo, then at the crowd of stern faces around him. He looked at Marvin. Marvin sputtered. This is a mob. This is intimidation." "No," the sheriff said quietly. He handed the paperwork back to Marvin. "This is a community, and they're all telling me the same story. Your paperwork smells bad, Mr. Briggs. And with Dr. Vance's evidence and multiple witnesses to your threats and the vandalism, I don't think a judge in this county would look too kindly on your claim." He turned to Jackson. "The horses are yours, clear and simple. If he bothers you again, you call me." The air went out of Marvin Briggs. His shoulders slumped. He looked at the crowd of people, all staring him down. There was no anger in their faces, just a solid, unmovable truth. He snatched the papers back, stuffed them into his jacket, and walked quickly to his truck. He had to ask Carl to move his pickup so he could get out. No one spoke as he got in, started the engine, and drove away, his tires spitting gravel. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, Elijah let out a small, happy sob and hugged his father's waist. Jackson looked around at all the people. His throat was too tight to speak. He just nodded, his eyes saying thank you. Carl walked over and clapped a hand on Jackson's shoulder. "You're one of us, Jackson. You don't have to fight alone." One by one, the neighbors and friends came up. They nodded to him. They smiled at Elijah. They didn't stay long. They had their own chores to do, but they had come. That was what mattered. Soon, only Dr. Vance was left. He looked into the barn at Rusty and the sleeping foal. "You did good last night," he said. "They did good today," Jackson said, looking down the empty driveway. "They remembered what kind of man you are," Dr. Vance said. He pulled a butterscotch candy from his pocket and gave it to Elijah. "And what kind of man Marvin Briggs is. Sometimes that's all the law you need." A few mornings later, the sunlight came through the kitchen window in a warm square. Jackson flipped pancakes on the griddle. Elijah was already at the table, lining up his favorite rocks next to his plate. "Which one is that?" Jackson asked, nodding at a smooth black stone. "That's midnight obsidian," Elijah said, his voice serious. "And this one," he held up a reddish-brown rock, "is rusty quartz." Jackson smiled. It was a real smile, one that felt at home on his face. He put 2 pancakes on Elijah's plate. "Better feed the rocks after you feed yourself." After breakfast, they walked out to the barn together. The air was cool and clean. The mess from the storm was gone. Inside, Rusty stood in her stall, her coat already looking glossier with good food and care. Midnight slept in the straw at her feet, her long legs tucked underneath her. "They look happy," Elijah said. "They do," Jackson agreed. He leaned on the stall door, just watching them. The tight ball of worry that had lived in his chest for weeks was gone. Later that morning, Dr. Vance's truck came up the drive. He got out, carrying his bag. "Came for a proper check on the new mother," he said. "And to see how the new father is doing." Jackson chuckled. "We're all doing just fine, Arlo." "Doctor." Vance examined both horses carefully. He listened to Midnight's heart. He checked Rusty's temperature. When he was finished, he gave Jackson a firm nod. "Perfect, both of them. You did a good job, Jackson." "Had some help," Jackson said, looking at Elijah. Dr. Vance reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 candies, a butterscotch for Elijah and a peppermint for Jackson. A reward for the team. As they stood in the quiet barn, Dr. Vance's expression turned thoughtful. "You know, I heard Marvin Briggs left the county yesterday. Probably won't be back. His kind doesn't like to be seen for what they are." Jackson nodded. He felt no anger, only relief. "I'm just glad it's over." "It's more than over, Doctor," Vance said. "It's a fresh start." He closed his bag. "You've got 2 beautiful horses, and from what I saw the other morning, you've got a whole town of friends you didn't know you had." After Dr. Vance left, Jackson and Elijah worked around the ranch. They fixed the last of the cut fence, weaving the new wire tightly. They mucked out the stall and laid fresh, sweet-smelling straw. It was simple, hard work. It felt good. In the afternoon, they led Rusty and Midnight out into the small pasture. The sun was warm. The filly was still wobbly, but she followed her mother closely. The 2 horses began to graze, their heads close together. Jackson and Elijah sat on the top rail of the fence, watching them. "It doesn't feel empty anymore," Elijah said after a while. Jackson knew what he meant. The ranch, the house, their lives. The quiet was still there, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was peaceful, not lonely. The space left by Clara would always be there, but it wasn't a hole anymore. It was a place filled with memory, not with hurt. "You're right," Jackson said. "It feels full." That night, after Elijah was in bed, Jackson didn't reach for his phone to listen to the old voicemail. Instead, he walked to Elijah's doorway and watched his son sleep. Then he went to the living room window and looked out at the barn. In the moonlight, he could see the dark shapes of 2 horses in the pasture. He thought about the $1. He thought about the laughter in the auction barn. He thought about the fear, the cut fence, the long night of the storm. None of it had been about money. It had always been about kindness. His simple act of kindness had brought them all of this. It had brought back his neighbors. It had shown his son what it meant to stand up for what's right. It had filled their home with life again. He was not a rich man. He would still fix tractors. They would still budget for groceries. But as he stood there, he knew he had everything he needed. He had his son. He had his memories. He had 2 horses in his field, and he had a community at his back. The $1 horse had not brought them a fortune. It had brought them something better. It had brought them a family. And for the first time in 2 long years, Jackson Miller felt that family was complete.